Good morning. Recently, I completed a video on the lunar month from, let's see, May 7th through June 6th, one new moon to the next. And that was about the sort of general influences that will affect everyone and every country. And I want to follow that up with a video on how the transits during this upcoming lunar month will affect particular countries and people. But I have so many now that I'm going to break it up into two parts. So what I'm doing now is just part one. So let me see if I can share my screen here. And I just need to get rid of a few windows so that I can see what I'm doing. And I need to expand this a bit. Hold on just a second. Okay, and now I believe we're ready to go. So this is the lunar month for countries and people, part one. And I'll talk briefly about America, Biden, Trump, China, Israel, Netanyahu, Hamas, and Iran in this first part, May 7th through June 6th. Also, I'll be looking only at major transits from Saturn on out. So that's going to be Saturn, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Okay, and I'll always begin with the bi-wheel, which has the chart for the country or person I'm looking at inside, and the transits at the time of the full moon on the outside. The full moon is halfway through the lunar month, so transits that are going to last for a while and be enduring, they usually show up also in this full moon chart. Now, one other thing I want to mention is my preferred chart for America is the July 2nd, 1776 chart for the passage of the Resolution for Independence. Many people will use a July 4th chart, and there are actually many different July 4th charts that have been used. One astrologer I know likes to go back to the time of uh, the new moon. Let's see, right before, or I should say new moon, the full moon, right before July 2nd. So there's a variety of different charts that people use for America, and many of them, I believe, are relevant. The creation of America happened in stages, not necessarily all at once overnight. So what I say here is going to apply mostly to all July 1776 charts. They will apply unless I'm talking about aspects to the midheaven, as I do here, or the ascendant, because those are going to be specific to particular charts, or if I talk about aspects to the moon, since the moon will have moved considerably in the 2 days from July 2nd to July 4th. But aside from that, all the other planets are pretty much in the same position. So, what do I have highlighted for America this month? Well, transiting Uranus is making a semi-square to the natal midheaven. So this is one of those aspects that will be very particular to this chart. The midheaven has to do with status in society, and in the chart for a country, it represents people in charge, people who have great status, such as the president or maybe some other people. Uranus always tries to break up the existing pattern. It's connected with both genius and eccentricity, uh, with both technological innovation and with revolution. So the semi-square, aspects like semi-squares and sesquiquadrates are both turning points or breaking points. And so it's not uncommon for events to break at these particular times when these aspects are in effect. Now, with transiting Uranus making a semi-square to the natal midheaven, this is going to create some sort of a tension for the leaders of this country, the president of the country in particular. And so there could be some sort of sudden changes in direction. Exactly what happens, I can't say. Astrology is basically a cosmic weather report. It tells you when a storm is brewing, it tells you when the skies are literally clear, but it does not tell you how people are going to react. Some people only react, and they are very predictable. When there's something tense going on, you can be pretty sure how they will respond if they don't use their free will to intervene. Other people, such as President Biden, are more mature and they are able to step back from the situation and choose how they respond. So I can never really predict very well what Biden is going to do because he is adept at turning astrological lemons into lemonade, while Trump, on the other hand, is a whole other matter entirely. He tends to react without thinking, in my opinion, without exercising his free will much. So if you see something that's going to make him erratic astrologically, well, you can be pretty sure he will be erratic in real life. If you see something in the astrological charts that suggests that he's going to be angry, you can be pretty sure that he will be lashing out at people. So I don't know exactly what will happen here, but there is pressure for some sort of changes in personnel or changes in direction, perhaps in the US government. Uh, Next thing, we have transiting Neptune, square natal Venus. Natal Venus, in addition to being the pleasure principle, our drive to reduce tension, it represents things that we enjoy and, as a consequence, things that we value. It also represents our nonverbal right brain, which is governed more by those feelings of this feels good, this doesn't feel so good, which result in a set of values of what's good, what's bad. Neptune, on the other hand, it tries to erase the boundaries between things. At its best, it provides vision and spiritual inspiration. At its worst, it creates a lot of confusion. So, with transiting Neptune square natal Venus, uh, people could be subject to misinformation and confused thinking. They could be acting uh, almost a reflex response with regard to their values, what they think is good, what they think is bad, without engaging their left brain to think about it or contemplate it a little bit more analytically. And since this Venus is in the ninth house here, that has to do with the group mind, what other people are thinking. And so, again, there could be some muddled thinking going on during this month or some misinformation. Now, to counter this, we also have some very good aspects. Transiting Uranus is making a trine to Neptune and also a trine to the natal moon. So, by transit, Uranus is completing a grand trine here. And that is very good. This suggests a lot of vision, a lot of inspiration, a lot of very creative thinking and innovation going on. So we may see inspired thinking in the functioning of our government. We may see technological breakthroughs or other things. At the same time, transiting Uranus is making a sextile to natal Mercury. That is actually completing a kite formation where Mercury sextiles uh, Neptune. It's in opposition to the moon. It's also making a sextile to transiting Uranus, and we have both this big triangle and this little triangle here, forming kind of a kite formation. So that is very good. That is very positive. And so I'm expecting some sort of probably technological innovations or creative thinking one way or another to be present in America this month. It could be, for instance, uh, good creative vision and thinking in foreign policy, or, as I said, something that occurs with regard to technology. Now, in astrology, I also like to say that in the real world, when you mix hot water with cold water, you get lukewarm water. In astrology, when you mix bad aspects with good aspects, it's more like a tossed salad. They sit just right next to each other. Nonetheless, when good things happen along with bad, if you've got more good things going on, it lessens the pain, let's say, of the bad aspects. Now, following my bike wheels, I always have a graph like this, a bar graph, which shows when these aspects will be in effect and when, if ever, they become exact. And the lunar month goes from about May 6th, so say roughly here, through May 7th, rather, through June 6th, roughly over here. And we see that Uranus semi-squared the midheaven. That is in effect now. It peaks on May 12th. And right now, certainly, there's a lot of student protests going on in America over the situation in Gaza. And many of these young students are critical of the Biden administration for providing support for Israel. And let's see, Neptune square Venus, that begins to pick up steam in mid-May, continues through the rest of the lunar month, gets stronger, and if it reaches exactness, it's going to be sometime after June. As for the good aspects, well, Uranus is making a trine to Neptune now. That lasts through about mid-May. And that is going to be beneficial. That combines creativity with vision. And toward the end of May, Uranus sextile Mercury goes into effect, as does Uranus making a trine to the moon. And those become exact on June 17th and 19th, respectively. That's into the next lunar month. But those two aspects become exact pretty close to one another. And so that could be some nice innovation or creativity of one sort or another happening a little bit after mid-June. Now, if we look at President Biden's chart, as I always say, he went through a lot of adversity as a young adult with the loss of his wife and child in a car accident, but he has learned from adversity and he has adapted turning these astrological lemons into lemonade. Okay, he has a lot of good stuff in his chart this month. One not so good thing, uh, transiting Pluto is still making a square to his natal moon. For the aspects here, I use about a 2-degree orb. And in these graphs, I tend to use, I believe, a 1-degree orb. And I hope I said that right. I hope I don't have it backwards. But with Pluto, square moon, all sorts of dire things can happen, particularly since the moon is the ruler of his 8th house of death. Well, the 8th house is death and transformation, but also other people's money and the money and values of the relationship rather as opposed to the individual. And Biden has had this aspect exact before, but with Moon in the fifth house, what has happened in the past is the tension or situation has been around his children, in particular, Hunter Biden. So I continue to expect Biden to turn astrological lemons into lemonade, but he is getting up in years. And eventually, these stresses will catch up with him. All I can say for sure is that as Pluto moves retrograde, makes it gets to the point where it makes an exact square with the moon again, he will be under increasing stress. It will be somewhat of a tense time, but aside from that, I can't say exactly what will happen. Worst case scenario, of course, is death. He could have perhaps a serious illness as a result of the stress, or if he handles it well, he might have a minor illness, uh, some sort of trauma to deal with, or it could just be about Hunter Biden again. Now, on the good side, let's see, transiting Pluto is also going to be making a trine to natal Uranus and a trine to natal Neptune at the same time. So these planets, the natal planets and the transiting Pluto, they are going to in themselves complete a grand trine. And actually, if we used a wider orb, we could include Pluto as an opposition to Jupiter and Jupiter making a trine natally to Neptune and Uranus. So we have something of a kite formation also occurring in his chart. Now, let me go back to the chart for America for just a second because I want to point out how much Uranus was involved in all of these major aspects this month. So, again, with Uranus being such a major player in the month for America, that suggests a lot of changes in innovation, most likely changes in innovation that are positive. Similarly, Pluto is having a good impact. Aside from the square to the moon, it's having a good impact on Biden. And so his power, vision, creativity, and optimism, his growth will all likely be impacted favorably. And rather than a square between Neptune and Venus, as we saw in the chart for America, Biden will have transiting Neptune making a trine for Venus. Venus is pretty close to the cusp of his first house. And with the trine from Neptune, this is going to enhance his allure. It'll give him a certain personal magnetism, which will be expressed through his kindness, his gentleness, as represented by Venus conjunct or close to the cusp of the first house. And he also has a Uranian transit going on. Transiting Uranus will be making a sextile to his Jupiter. And so that is going to enhance his optimism and his growth. Jupiter is the planet of expansion and growth. It's our drive to grow in all sorts of ways intellectually, expand our horizons. And Uranus is going to operate as the planet of creativity here. So, a lot of creative thinking, vision, and power on Biden's part that I hope will work out well for him and for the nation. Now, if we look at, let's see, the aspects here, and I can see from this that uh, it looks like the orb here is going to be 1 degree, while The orb I'm using over here is 2 degrees, since the square between Pluto and Moon is showing up here, but not quite yet here. Okay, so Pluto square the Moon, that is going to start growing in influence probably during the last week of May. Does not become exact in June. Uh, Throughout most of this lunar month, we have Pluto trine Uranus and Pluto trine natal Neptune. Those will be in effect throughout the entire lunar month. The trine to Neptune becomes exact on June 24th in the next lunar month, and Neptune trine Venus, that is in effect now and starts to wane by the time we get to the last week of May. Uh, Transiting Uranus sextile natal Jupiter, that's going to pick up at the end of May, and it becomes exact on June 18th during the next lunar month. All right, now if we look at how this lunar month will impact Donald Trump, well, things are much more problematic. Again, I have the full moon on the outside, Trump's chart on the inside. One of the things we have going on here is transiting Saturn is going to make a square to natal Uranus. Uranus is in his 10th house, which has to do with uh, status in society, professional honors. Saturn, whereas Jupiter is the drive to expand our horizons to grow, Saturn is the drive to regulate and control ourselves. Hence, Saturn tends to be more restrictive. And right now, transiting Saturn is casting a cloud over Trump's status in the social environment. It's putting restrictions upon that. Also, transiting Uranus is conjunct his midheaven. That can result in some sort of sudden change in status. Transiting Uranus is making a semi-square to his natal Mercury. That creates some tension between the two. It will probably continue to be difficult for Donald Trump to curb his speech. He's had several gag orders imposed upon him, and he keeps violating those gag orders while he goes through his trial. And there's a good chance that that will probably continue because his communication, his speech will tend to be very impulsive. And let's see, he also has transiting Pluto making a sesquiquadrate to natal Uranus, again with natal Uranus in the 10th house, having to do with his status in society. Pluto being the planet of death and transformation, this suggests some sort of transformation to his status. So, I don't know exactly how the current trial that he is involved in will turn out, whether he will be found guilty or not guilty. If he's found guilty, I don't know what penalty will be imposed upon him, whether it will just involve money or jail time. Either way, the impact of the proceedings, whether he's guilty or not, it is putting restrictions on his ability to be spontaneous, restrictions upon his status in society. It is causing some sort of transformation there. Okay, at the same time, he has transiting Chiron, trine the moon, and making a sextile to his natal sun. Those aspects will bring out the sweeter side of Chiron, and consequently, he will probably also experience healing on some level and inspiration of some sort. Chiron is a drive to go beyond the visible to that which is not visible to us, that which is non material, more spiritual, if you will. Not that he's automatically going to become a spiritual person, but he has some higher energies at work here, which will probably benefit him in some way and help heal him and probably make him an inspiration, at least to his hardcore followers. And transiting Uranus, last thing, is making a sextile to his natal Saturn. In his natal chart, Saturn is conjunct Venus, the ruler of his 10th house. And consequently, while some forces are working to restrict his status, other forces will help enhance it. Uh, and we've kind of seen both things already. The criminal trial, it puts some restrictions upon him, but among his base, among his followers, these events just enhance his popularity. So, a little bit of a mixed bag, but the hard aspects are much more prevalent than the good aspects. And if we look at this chart, let's see Pluto making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. That's in effect throughout May. It's waning. Saturn square Uranus. That will be exact on May 17th. That's in this lunar month, so that's a day to keep an eye on. Transiting Uranus semi-square natal Mercury. That is exact on the 26th. In effect throughout the entire lunar month, so keep an eye on this day. Transiting Uranus conjunct midheaven, that is exact on June 4th. Still within this lunar month, it begins to make its impact felt from around mid-May past mid-June, say into about the third week of June. So keep an eye on this period and this date. Transiting Chiron trine Moon, that is in effect now. It was exact, or will be exact on May 10th. And transiting Chiron, sextile natal Sun, that starts to gain in strength around the last week of May, and it becomes exact on June 10th in the next lunar month. Now let's take a look at China. I've been seeing some news reports lately about economic trouble in China, and that is reflected quite a bit in uh, the transits for this upcoming lunar month from May 7th through June 6th. And just at a glance, you can see I have a lot of things in the second house circled. And the second house has to do with money and finances. So let's see what we have here. Transiting Pluto conjunct natal moon and semi-square natal ascendant. Well, the moon represents the people, the ascendant, the face of the nation that they present to the world, and Pluto, death, transformation of some sort. Second house has to do with finances and values. So it looks like the finances of uh, the country and the people will be affected by this particular transit, by the tensions of this transit. We also have transiting Chiron, square natal Jupiter. Jupiter is also in the second house of money and finances, and it's making a sesquiquadrate to natal Chiron. So this could cause some sort of wounding to the economy. Okay. Or perhaps other areas in China. So we don't get as much news from China as we do from other parts of the world, but keep an eye on things. Also, we got transiting Neptune making a sesquiquadrate to natal Mars. And natal Mars is in the 8th house of death, transformation, and other people's money. So again, the second 8th house, this is a financial axis, among other things. With Neptune making a sesquiquadrate to Mars, Mars is energy, uh, action, but Neptune, it dissolves boundaries, it can weaken things. So this could hint at some sort of economic weakness, possibly due to changes in trade with other countries, since it's other people's money involved. And let's see, next we have transiting Uranus over here making a sesquiquadrant to the Sun. That is in 10th house, has to do with leadership, status in society. So there could be some changes of direction when it comes to leadership in China. I'm not saying that their president is going to be replaced. That would be a more extreme example of this aspect, but there will be pressures probably to change direction in some way. And let's see, transiting Uranus, it's very close to the cusp of the sixth house, which has to do traditionally with health and occupation. This represents the workers, manufacturing, all that those workers do. So again, some sudden change or maybe some protests coming from workers. We just have to wait and see. Keep an eye on the news. Transiting Saturn down here is making a semi-square to natal moon and a square to the ascendant. So again, Saturn puts restrictions on things. The moon is in the second house, has to do with money, finances. And I believe I've read that their economy is slowing down, and Saturn puts restrictions on things, restrictions on growth. So this all suggests that there might be quite a bit of slowdown in things like economic growth, gross domestic product, all of those measures of the financial well-being of a country. So that is a possibility, a good possibility, but as I always say, this is just a cosmic weather report. We don't know exactly what will happen. That depends upon the decisions that people and leaders make. Now, on the good side, we have transiting Uranus making a trine to natal Jupiter. So the economy may get a boost through technology, for example. And transiting Saturn is making a trine to natal Venus. So that could help stabilize things in China. So again, I don't know exactly what will happen, but my best bet is going to be perhaps an economic slowdown and changes in trade relationships and pressure for leadership to change direction. Okay, if we look at this graph, we see that there's a lot more red over here than blue. So, dynamic month for China. A lot of challenges. We have Chiron sesquiquadrant, natal Chiron. That's actually going to fade after about the first week of the lunar month. Pluto, transiting Pluto conjunct Moon, that is growing in strength, peaks in the next lunar month on June 26. Transiting Pluto semi-square the ascendant, that is growing in strength, peaks on June 21st. And transiting Neptune sesquiquadrant natal Mars, that's growing in strength, peaks on June 10th, right after we get into the next lunar month. Transiting Uranus sesquiquadrant the Sun, that peaks on May 5th. Okay, so that is not far away. And, and then those pressures will gradually fade as we go through the month of May. Likewise, Saturn sesquiquadrant, I'm sorry, semi-square natal moon, that is already fading. It's not going to last long in this next lunar month. This the one that starts on May 7th, and transiting Saturn square ascendant, that is also fading and is not going to last very long. in the lunar month from May 7th through June 6th. Transing Chiron square Jupiter, though, that begins in mid-May, and it is going to be exact on June 8th. So that will make an impact for most of this lunar month, and it could indicate some wounding that might happen to the economy. Now, as far as the good aspects, transing Uranus trine Jupiter, that is exact on May 4th, right before the start of the new moon, the new lunar month on May 7th, but continues through probably roughly the first 3 weeks of May. Transing Saturn trine Neptune, well, when this one ends, this one with Saturn picks up, so things may start to stabilize a bit in the latter week of May, and this becomes exact in the following lunar month on June 16th. Okay, now let's take a look at Israel. Here we have transing Uranus conjunct natal Sun. And this is a very dangerous time for Israel, the Middle East, and indeed the entire world, because we're repeating a lot of the same aspects that were present on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas brutally invaded Israel. Consequently, I saw back then that around the time of the April 8th solar eclipse of 2024, that things may get stirred up again in the Middle East. And I saw that there was a definite possibility that Iran could be drawn into a wider regional war, and that almost happened. But fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. Uh, Iran and Israel made what are now seen as sort of symbolic gestures towards one another in response to the tension, and showed that they had the ability to inflict damage, each upon the other, without actually escalating uh, conflict. That was good, and that's a good example of how free will can intervene in any astrological aspect. Again, these aspects, these transits, they just show the cosmic weather. They indicate tensions that are there, they indicate when things are going well, but we get to make the decision with regard to how we respond. So, last October 7th, Uranus, transing Uranus, was stimulating, activating this opposition between natal Sun and natal Chiron, and that resulted in wounding to Israel, and then they wounded in return. The same thing is going on now. This axis is being this axis is being stimulated, and Israel has certainly delayed going into Rafah, probably under pressure from President Biden in the United States, but it's still saying that it is going to go into Rafah. And we still don't have or haven't heard of a plan to protect civilians in Gaza. So there's still a potential for some bad things to happen very suddenly. Let's just hope uh, that they don't, that tensions can be reduced on both sides of this conflict. Let's hope that Hamas releases hostages, and let's hope that Israel uh, engages with Hamas in ways that at least don't harm so many Palestinian civilians. But it's a very volatile situation, as indicated by the conjunction of transing Uranus with uh, the Sun in Israel's chart. Now, we also see here that transing Chiron is opposite uh, the ascendant in Israel's chart, which means that it is conjunct the descendant, and this can represent wounding coming from other countries or other people. Certainly, wounding from Hamas. We also have protests around the world right now and involving a lot of student groups, a lot of students, and there's pressure to divest from Israel to stop investment in Israeli companies or military. And so Israel is undergoing that pressure right now. And then we have transing Saturn making a sesquiquadrant to the natal moon. This is putting restrictions on Israel's leadership in particular and also its people. The one good thing is that transing Uranus is sextile uh, the midheaven in Israel's natal chart, and this helps promote some creativity and innovation within the government. So hopefully, the leaders in Israel will exercise their free will in order to come up with good ways to respond to the various things going on. But there's certainly tensions right now within the country. And if we look at these bar graphs, we see a lot more red than blue. That's the situation in Israel right now. Uranus conjunct Sun, that is going to be exact on May 23rd, my birthday. And it is in effect throughout the entire lunar month. So uh, Uranus always breaks up the existing pattern. That could work out well or could work out badly, but does suggest that some decisions may be made on the fly, spur of the moment, and maybe somewhat erratic. Saturn sesquiquadrant the moon. That starts to pick up steam during the latter week of May, a little bit before the latter week arrives. It is exact on June 20th. It gets pretty strong in June, and this is going to be exact in the next lunar month. But this can create some problems, some restrictions for leadership in Israel, as well as ordinary people. Likewise, transiting Chiron in opposition to the ascendant, that starts to go into effect about the same time, around the last week of May, becomes exact on June 22nd. And since this impacts June more than May, it's a little worrisome with regard to possible wounding that lies ahead for Israel. This could be wounding from others to Israel. It could also be Israel creating a lot of wounding for them. So others could wound Israel, Israel could wound others, but there are still ominous things going on astrologically in June. Transiting Uranus, sextile the midheaven, that has most of its impact in June and in the next lunar month, and it's exact on the 16th. That can be beneficial, that can be uh, creativity, innovation with regard to leadership or status in the world. Exactly how that will play out, we just have to keep an eye on things. Okay, now if we look at Netanyahu and his transits for this lunar month from May 7th through June 6th, he will have transiting Chiron, sesquiquadrant natal Chiron. He will probably experience some personal wounding of one sort or another. Transiting Uranus is going to be sesquiquadrant. His natal Mercury, that's in the 10th house, so his status will probably be impacted one way or another. Uh, Also, for him, transiting Uranus will make a trine to his midheaven and to his natal Jupiter, completing this grand trine. So, despite these other pressures, he might be able to hang on and maintain uh, his control, power, and status within Israel. So, some serious bad things here, some very good things going on too. Which will win out? We have to wait and see. And if we look at this graph, we see just as much red as we do blue. Chiron sesquiquadrant, natal Chiron, that starts to be felt by mid-May, peaks on June 4th and continues throughout June. Transing Uranus sesquiquadrant is 10th house Mercury. That starts to go into effect around the third week of May, peaks on June 9th. So these tensions are peaking around the June 6th new moon that will begin the next lunar month. On the good side, Uranus is trying the midheaven. That was exact on May 1st, continues through about mid-May. Transing Uranus trying Jupiter, that picks up a little bit before mid-May, exact on the 29th of May, and continues through mid-June. So the beneficial stuff happens, it's strongest in May. The tensions, they're going to be stronger in June. So we might say that the worst is yet to come. Okay, if we look at Hamas, continued wounding. We have transiting Saturn, square, uh, natal Sun, and conjunct natal ascendant. Saturn puts restrictions on things. So Hamas is really literally under the gun right now. They have their backs up against the wall. They are having to, for the most part, hide in those tunnels, at least the leadership, and they are going to continue to be restricted during this lunar month. Transiting Neptune is making a sesquiquadrant to the natal moon. This can result in confusion, or in the case of Hamas, even more fanaticism. So they could have a lot of muddled thinking at this point, be thinking with their emotions and not logic. And this could work out not so well for them. Also, they have transiting Pluto making a semi-square to their sun. Think of the sun as the soul of the nation or the organization, and Pluto, death and destruction, making a semi-square. There's a good chance that there is more destruction, loss of life in store for Hamas and their leadership. Now, the one good thing they have going for them is transiting Chiron is making a trine to natal Saturn. And that can bring in the sweeter side of Chiron, which can be some healing energy of one sort or another. Saturn is, it looks like it is pretty close to the cusp of the 10th house. Possibly this could save the leadership of Hamas, though I can't say that I necessarily want them to be saved. They are a terrorist organization, and even though there has been an excessive amount of damage inflicted upon the Palestinian people in Gaza, it's also the case that Hamas, for a couple of decades now, they have fired thousands of rockets into Israel, committed acts of terror over and over again, broken ceasefires over and over again. And Israel has to defend itself one way or another. Hamas has to be neutralized, but the lives of innocent citizens have to be protected too. I see uh, transgressions on both sides of this conflict, and uh, all those transgressions need to stop. Those uh, horrors committed by both sides as this war wages on. But like I said, transiting Chiron, making a trine to natal Saturn, that could bring some sort of healing to the leadership of Hamas. And here we see the bar graphs, a lot more red than blue. Pluto's semi-square sun, that is waning, but it continues throughout the entire lunar month. Neptune's sesquiquadrate natal moon, that's gaining in strength and is exact on the 23rd. Again, my birthday. And we saw something else in here that was going to be exact on the 23rd. Let me go back. Yeah. In the chart for Israel, Uranus conjunct Sun, that's exact on the 23rd. And for Hamas, Neptune sesquiquadrate the moon, that is going to be exact on the 23rd. So there may be something that happens around May 23rd that impacts both groups. Transiting Saturn square Sun is going to be exact on May 15th. It pretty much is gone in early June, but transiting Saturn conjunct Ascendant, that picks up where this one leaves off. So throughout pretty much all of May and June, Hamas is going to be restricted in a lot of ways. But transiting Chiron, trine Neptune, that picks up a little bit before the last week of May, it looks like. Peaks in June. Uh, and this will provide something of benefit, most likely, to Hamas. In June, when we get into the next lunar month, uh, it's going to be assisted by transiting Chiron, trine the midheaven. That doesn't come into effect at all in the lunar month I'm talking about now, but in the one that follows. So again, there may be some sort of healing taking place by the time we get to June. But May it's got a lot of tension for Hamas, particularly let's keep an eye on what happens around the 15th and the 23rd of May. Now, if we look at Iran, they're not a completely open society, so we get some news from Iran, but we don't know everything going on with their leadership. So we may not know exactly how these aspects translate into events in that country. But transiting Pluto will be opposite natal Pluto. I'm sorry, natal Jupiter. Natal Jupiter is in the fourth house. Pluto is power, death, transformation. It's going through the 10th house, which has to do with Iran's leadership. So the fourth house is more the homeland, the people. There may be some sort of a hardship inflicted on the people in this coming lunar month, either from within, from their own leadership, or perhaps from without. Transiting Uranus is going to be square natal Mercury, so the country may make some sort of sudden actions that exacerbate things. Mercury has to do with thoughts, ideas, and communication, maybe revolutionary rhetoric uh, coming forth from Iran. That itself is perhaps not anything new. Transiting Chiron is going to be square the natal midheaven. That can result in some sort of wounding to leadership. So, this is all very interesting. 10th house is impacted quite a bit, as is the first house. But on the good side, we have transiting Chiron, making a sextile to the natal sun. That can bring some healing to the nation. And transing Uranus, uh, while making a square to that natal Mercury, it's making a trine to the midheaven. So this will provide some sort of creative or innovative release of tensions for the leadership of Iran or for their status in the world, perhaps. So we've got a mix of the good and the bad. It looks like a little bit more red than blue in this graph. And let's see, Pluto will be in opposition to Jupiter very strongly throughout both May and June. It's exact right after the start of the next lunar month on June 10th. Transiting Uranus is going to be making that square to natal Mercury throughout the entire lunar month at least, and becomes exact on May 20th. And that is just right before that very important date of May 23rd, a day which will impact both Israel and Hamas. So that's interesting. Transiting Chiron is square the midheaven. That starts to go into effect maybe a little bit before the start of the third week of May, becomes exact on June 16th. Okay, and on the good side, we have transiting Uranus, making a trine to the midheaven. That's exact on May 9th. It's in effect throughout most of May, and then its influence goes away. Transiting Chiron, sextile natal sun, that is going to be in effect throughout all of this lunar month. Oh, interesting. It is going to be exact on May 24th, just one day after that, what might be an impactful May 23rd date. This helps bring some healing to Iran and to its leadership. And of course, even though it's roughly 350 drones and missiles and hypersonic missiles that it fired at Israel, 99% of which were shot down, that action nonetheless has been celebrated within Iran and celebrated by Iran's allies and some in the Arab nations. So that has helped enhance the status of Iran and its leadership. Okay, and that is going to be it for part one of the lunar month for countries and people. And part two, I'll talk about Putin and Russia and Ukraine and King Charles, Princess Kate, the United Kingdom, and uh, let's see, a few other things. I think also Pope Francis and maybe one or two other people. So I hope you also watch that part. And now let me stop sharing my screen. Just give me a second here to get things set. And here I am. I'm back. So that's it for today. This is been part one of the lunar month for countries and people from May 7th through June 6th. So I hope you join me soon for part two. In the meantime, uh, stay safe and be well and be kind to yourself and others. Okay, so long.